At an auction house in Haworth, Isaiah Moss bought a fire-scorched hotel safe for $90, and the whole room laughed as he signed the slip. It was 410 pounds of burned steel, fused shut by a fire that had killed a woman, and worth less than the gas it would take to haul it home. The auctioneer told the crowd it would make a handsome planter. No one in that hall knew Isaiah had spent 9 years as a certified vault technician, or that the man who'd bolted that safe to the floor of the Bellrose Hotel in 1971 had taught him the trade with his own hands. And no one knew what was still sealed inside it. They were wrong. Before we go any further, leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, and make sure you subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you do not want to miss. The morning it began, Isaiah Moss woke at 6:10 without an alarm, the way a man wakes when his body has kept a schedule longer than his mind has. The radiator banged twice and fell silent. April in Haworth came in cold off the Sable River, and the window over the sink was coated with a gray damp that never dried before noon. His daughter was already up. Nia Moss was 7 years old and shaped like a question mark, all elbows and curiosity, and she was standing on the second rung of a kitchen chair with a cereal box clutched to her chest like a trophy. "You're going to fall," Isaiah said. "Not yet," Nia said. "That is not an argument. That is a timetable." She laughed at him, and he lifted her down by the ribs and set her on the floor. Isaiah poured the milk. He set the bowl in front of her and stood at the counter drinking coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes before he ever got to it, because that was the temperature coffee was in his life now, and he'd stopped caring. On the wall by the door hung a work jacket, navy canvas with a collar gone soft. On the shelf above it sat a steel tension bar the length of a forearm, dulled with old oil, with 2 letters filed into the flat side. O and M. Otis Moss. Isaiah's grandfather had carried that bar in a canvas roll for 41 years, into bank basements and jewelry stores and the back offices of hotels all over the county. He had placed it in Isaiah's hand when he was 11 years old and said one sentence about it that Isaiah never forgot. "The lock will tell you. It just won't tell you twice." Otis had been dead since 2009. The bar had not moved from that shelf in 6 years because the work that needed it had stopped coming. "Are we going to the thing?" Nia asked. "We're going to the thing." "Is it boring?" "It's a room full of grown-ups bidding on other people's furniture," Isaiah said. "Yes." Она подумала об этом всем лицом. «Тогда зачем мы идем?» Он не стал ей врать. Он дал себе такое правило, когда умерла ее мать, когда Нии было 3 года, и слово «аневризма» прозвучало из уст врача, как камень, брошенный в ведро. «Потому что мистеру Бевинсу нужен напольный сейф, на котором он сможет потренироваться», — сказала Айзея. «А мне нужны эти часы работы». Рэй Бевинс держал мастерскую Бевинс Lock and Safe в шлакоблочном здании на Кестрел-стрит с вывеской, нарисованной от руки, и кислородной трубкой, которая тянулась за ним по мастерской, как маленькая терпеливая собака. Рэю был 71 год. Его легкие работали примерно на треть от того, что должны были, и он платил Айзее наличными за вечернюю работу, потому что только это и мог предложить. Это была единственная мастерская в Хелворте, где 3 года назад ответили на телефонный звонок после того случая в Корвине. Айзея не говорил о том случае в Корвине, ни с Рэем, ни с кем. Они пошли пешком до Данбар-стрит, потому что грузовик был Рэя, и он был нужен Рэю до полудня. Ния считала ливневые стоки. Аукционный зал был переделан из старого кинотеатра, и на фасаде все еще висела световая вывеска. а кто-то выложил на ней буквы Merrick Estate Auctions, и не все буквы были одинаковыми. А на тротуаре стояла очередь людей в хороших пальто с бумажными стаканчиками в руках. Каталог на складном столе был напечатан на плотной бумаге, и Айзея еще до того, как открыл его, понял, для кого устроена эта распродажа. Но все равно открыл. Распродажа имущества отеля Bellrose, лоты с 1 по 306. Латунная фурнитура, потолочные розетки, мраморная стойка регистрации, разделенная на 4 части, двери, радиаторы, люстра из вестибюля, описанная как пострадавшая от пожара. То, что он искал, он нашел на предпоследней странице. Лот 218. Напольный сейф середины века, пострадавший от пожара, содержимое неизвестно, дверь не открывается. Продается как есть, без каких-либо гарантий состояния или содержимого. Молодая женщина с планшетом спросила, будет ли он регистрироваться для участия в торгах. И Айзе ответил, что да. И она записала его имя на карточке и вручила ему табличку с номером, у которой один угол был сбит напильником. На ее бейдже было написано «Калин». Она посмотрела на Нию, потом на куртку Айзеи, потом снова на Нию, и у нее в глазах что-то мелькнуло. Не презрение. У мужчины, подошедшего к ней сзади, выражение лица было совсем другим. Дейлу Мэрику было за 50. На нем был свитер с короткой молнией цвета овсянки, и в нем чувствовалась та особая непринужденность человека, которого ни разу в жизни не просили что-либо объяснять в его собственном здании. Он посмотрел на табличку в руке Айзеи так, как хозяин дома смотрит на пальто, повешенное не на тот крючок. «Вы в курсе, что здесь есть комиссия покупателя?» — сказал Мэрик. 20% сверху от цены молотка. Я читал условия. Also, everything has to be taken out the same day. Out by 5. Merrick's eyes dropped to Naya, then came back up. This is a collector's auction. If you're looking for something cheaper, the yard on 9th Street takes walk-ins on Saturdays. No buyer's premium there. Isaiah didn't answer. He had learned a long time ago that some sentences are traps with the teeth showing, and that the fastest way through a room like this is to make yourself unremarkable. He took his daughter's hand and found 2 aisle seats near the back, under a heating vent that rattled and blew no heat at all. The auction started at 9. The room filled with the smell of wet wool and cologne. Isaiah sat through 4 hours of it. The chandelier sold for $11,000 to a woman who never looked up from her phone. Dealers bid with 2 fingers. Merrick worked the podium with a headset mic in a rhythm you could set a watch by, and every so often he cracked a joke about a lot no one wanted, and the room gave him the laugh he was angling for. Nia lasted longer than most adults would have. By lot 190, she was asleep against Isaiah's arm, mouth open, and he stayed perfectly still so he wouldn't wake her. Then a man in a charcoal suit came in through the side door and took a place along the wall with his hands folded. He didn't register for a paddle. He didn't sit down. Isaiah noticed him the way you notice a tool that doesn't belong on the bench. The man looked at the podium, and Merrick looked back at him, and something passed between them that was over in less than a second. Isaiah filed it away. He just didn't know what drawer to put it in yet. Lot 218 came up at 17 minutes past 1. 2 men in coveralls rolled it out on a pallet jack, and the room made a sound that was half laugh, half groan, because it was the ugliest thing anyone had brought into that hall all day. The safe stood a little under 3 feet tall. Its paint had burned off in sheets and come back as scale. The dial was gone, sheared off clean, and the spindle hole stared from the door like an empty eye socket. Down one side ran a bloom of rust the color of dried blood, where a fire hose had cooled 200 pounds of glowing steel in about 4 seconds. Lot 218, Merrick said. The famous safe. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm contractually obligated to tell you the contents are unknown, and personally obligated to tell you there are no contents, because this thing sat in a fire for 6 hours." The room laughed. "We had 2 locksmiths look at it," Merrick said. "One of them charged me for the visit and told me to sell it for scrap. So, $60. Do I hear 60? No one heard 60. 40. A dealer near the front said something to the man next to him, and they both grinned. "Somebody stick a plant in it," Merrick said. $30. 30. Anybody." Isaiah raised his paddle. He did it the way he did everything else, without any fuss, and Merrick's patter stalled for half a beat, which, in that room, was as good as a spotlight. Heads turned. 140 people in nice coats looked at a black man in a canvas work jacket with a sleeping child on his shoulder, and the whole hall instantly understood that something entertaining was about to happen. "30 to the gentleman in the back," Merrick said. "Do I hear 40? Anyone? $40 to save this man from himself." That got the biggest laugh of the day. No one bid against him. Merrick walked it up in $10 jumps against absolutely nothing, playing the room like a comic working over a heckler he'd already crushed. The price floated all the way up to $90 on hot air alone. Isaiah let it happen. He'd come with $180 in an envelope, and he knew down to the cent what the buyer's premium would bring it to. The hammer came down. "Sold, $90, lot 218. Merrick leaned into the microphone with the smile of a man doing someone a favor. "Sir, congratulations. You now own the heaviest paperweight in this county. You got a truck, or are we all going to stand here and watch you carry it?" The room laughed one more time. Isaiah stood up. He shifted his daughter's weight onto his hip, and she half woke and buried her face in his collar, and he walked down the aisle through all that noise to the clerk's table at the front without changing his pace once. He paid $108 in cash. Colleen Bird counted it twice and wrote him a receipt on carbonless paper, pressing hard so the yellow copy would take. She slid it across the table and kept her hand on it half a second longer than she needed to. "Keep that," she said. "The pink copy goes in our book. Keep yours somewhere you won't lose it." "I will," Isaiah said. He didn't know then that the paper in his hand would turn out to be worth more than every lot sold in that building that day combined, or that 4 different lawyers would spend an entire summer trying to make it disappear. No one was laughing 11 hours later. Getting the safe out of that building was its own little humiliation, and Merrick got to watch every bit of it. Ray's truck was a 1994 flatbed with a winch mounted behind the cab and a plywood ramp that stayed tucked under the bed. Isaiah backed it up to the alley door at 2:30, with Nia strapped into the middle seat, wide awake now and working on a granola bar. 2 of Merrick's floor guys helped him get the pallet jack under the skid. Then they found out what 410 pounds can do to a plywood ramp at the wrong angle, and one of them said he had a bad shoulder and went back inside. Isaiah handled it with the winch, a come-along, and 40 minutes he did not have. Merrick came out to the loading door twice. The first time, he stood there with his arms crossed and said nothing, which is something certain men do when they want you to feel them watching. The second time, he brought out a woman in a camel coat. He pointed at the safe and said something Isaiah couldn't hear, and the woman put a hand over her mouth the way people do at a joke they know is a little cruel and want credit for knowing is cruel. 5 o'clock, Merrick called out. "You're ahead of schedule. Good for you." Isaiah tightened one strap. He checked the second strap. He put the come-along back in the toolbox, closed the lid, walked around the truck, and got in. "Dad," Nia said once they were moving. "That man doesn't like you." "That man doesn't know me." "Is that the same thing?" Isaiah thought about it long enough that she stopped waiting for an answer. "Sometimes," he said. "Usually not." The Bellrose Hotel was a 6-story brick building on the corner of Dunbar and 9th, built in 1928, back when Hallworth still had money coming off the river. By the time it burned, it wasn't a hotel in any way a traveler would recognize. It was single rooms with a shared bathroom at the end of each hall, 81 long-term residents, mostly old, mostly poor. Rent was paid week to week in a caged office on the ground floor. It burned on February 11th at 2:20 in the morning. One person died. Her name was Alma Reyes. She was 61, she cleaned rooms there 4 nights a week, and she lived in room 409, and the fire report said she was found 9 feet from the door to stairwell B on the 4th floor. The Hallworth Ledger ran her photograph for 2 days. Then a man on the city council said the word tragedy into a microphone. The fire marshal's office released a preliminary finding of an electrical fault inside a wall cavity, and the Bellrose stopped being news. Nia asked about the safe on the drive back because she asked about everything. "What's in it?" "Nothing, probably." Isaiah changed lanes. "Paper burns, money burns. It sat in the fire all night, baby." "Then why'd you buy it?" "Because the door's still shut," Isaiah said. She didn't understand, and he didn't expect her to. He hardly wanted to explain it to himself. A fire that hot, burning that long, would usually pop a safe like that open somehow. It would crack a weld, throw the boltwork out of alignment, split a seam. But this one had lost its dial and its paint, and nothing else. The door was still exactly where it had been at 20 past 2 on the morning of February 11th. Ray Bevins was in the shop when Isaiah backed the truck in. He came out of the office with his oxygen cart, walked slowly around the flatbed once, and laid a flat hand on the scorched steel like a man greeting a horse. "Vaughn and Rowe," Ray said. 1240. "You know it?" "I know the model. That's a 1960s body with a 1970s door." Ray coughed into his fist and looked at the hinge side. "Somebody put a lot of thought into a hotel that didn't need it." Isaiah crouched by the base plate. There were 4 anchor bolts, sheared off where the demolition crew had cut them, and stamped into the plate below the 3rd bolt was a mark he had seen 100 times before he was 12. A tiny punched square with the letter M inside it, an installer's mark. Otis Moss punched that square into every floor safe he ever set in concrete, because he used to say a man ought to be able to find his own work in the dark. Isaiah sat back on his heels and didn't say anything for a while. "What?" Ray said. "My grandfather installed this safe." Ray looked at the mark. Then he looked at Isaiah, and something complicated passed across his face, and he rolled the cart back a step. "Then it's not shop property," he said. "It's yours. Use my bay, use my rig. I don't want a dollar from it." "Ray, don't argue with a man on oxygen. It's not sporting." Isaiah worked his shift first because that was the deal, and the deal was why he could pay the rent. 2 lockouts and a rekeying job at a laundromat on Pell Avenue. He picked Nia up from Mrs. Okonkwo across the hall at 9, fed her, and read her 2 pages from a book about a girl who lived in a lighthouse. She was asleep before the 3rd page. He stood in her doorway longer than he needed to. She had slept with one arm outside the blanket ever since she was a baby. Then he went back down to the shop. The reason Isaiah Moss no longer worked at Corwin Vault and Safe was a hospital. He'd been at Corwin for 9 years. He had the certifications, the factory training, the letters after his name that means something to maybe 400 people in the whole country, and absolutely nothing to anyone else. In the spring of the year Naya turned 4, he was sent to do the annual inspection on the narcotics vault at St. Brendan's, and that was when he found the relocker on the door had been bypassed. Not broken, bypassed. A steel tab had been bent back and pinned in place so the device couldn't fire, which meant anyone who got past the keypad could walk into a room holding 11,000 doses of controlled medication. Isaiah wrote it up. Then he pulled the service tickets and saw that the same technician had signed off on that vault 4 years in a row, and that the technician was Corwin's operations manager's son-in-law, and he wrote that up too. The vault was repaired. Nobody was charged with anything. 4 months later, Corwin restructured its service division, and Isaiah's position was eliminated. His final review, written by a man who had shaken his hand at a Christmas party, described him as difficult to place in client-facing roles. There's no union for that. There's no hearing. There's just a phone that stops ringing. He made 22 calls in the 6 weeks that followed. Every one of them was polite. Every one of them had already spoken to somebody. In this line of work, there are maybe 200 people at the top, and they all know each other, and a rumor doesn't have to be true to spread. Ray Bevins was call number 23. Ray had said, on the phone, in about 9 seconds, "Corwin, are you the one who found the pinned relocker at St. Brendan's?" "Yes." "Can you start Thursday?" Isaiah had never asked him why. He figured he already knew. Ray had spent 50 years in a trade where a man's word is the only stock he carries, and he had seen what happened to Isaiah's, and decided to be the one shop in town that wasn't going along with it. The shop at 11 at night smelled like cutting oil and cold concrete and the lingering ghost of Ray's cigarettes from 20 years earlier. Isaiah rolled the safe onto a steel dolly and moved it under the good light over the front bay. He put on a shop apron. He took the tool roll out of his own bag, canvas older than he was, laid it on the bench, and let it unroll under its own weight. The tension bar with the 2 filed letters was lying in the 3rd pocket. He didn't touch it yet. First, he read the door, the way Otis had taught him to read a door before ever laying a hand on it, because the fastest way in is almost never the first one you think of, and the second fastest is almost never force. The spindle had been sheared off, snapped clean at the plate. After the fire, someone had taken an angle grinder to the dial, and not gently. That was interesting. Salvage crews don't grind the dial off a junk safe. They throw a strap around it and haul it off to the yard. Isaiah placed his fingertips on the face of the door and moved them slowly across the metal in a careful grid, feeling for the heat map, and he found exactly what a fire like that leaves behind. The steel had warped into a shallow dish. Not enough to see, but enough to feel if you'd spent 9 years with your hands on doors. Then he found the second thing, and he stopped. There was a drill mark in the door, low on the hinge side, about 4 inches above the base plate, a shallow cone 1/8 of an inch deep, with a bright ring of burr where the bit had skated and stopped. It wasn't a fire mark. Fire doesn't do that. Someone had put a carbide bit right there, started a hole, and given up. And the burr was bright, unoxidized, clean silver metal, which meant it had been drilled after the fire, which meant someone had already tried to get into this safe, failed, and then let it go to auction for $90 with a joke attached. Isaiah stood there in the dark of that shop, with his hand flat against steel his grandfather had bolted into the floor 5 years before he was born. For the first time in 3 years, he felt that old thing rise in his chest, the thing he had trained himself not to feel. He looked at the clock above the part shelf. 11:20. He picked up the tension bar. There's a thing that happens to a man's face when he starts doing the work he was made to do, and there was no one in that shop to see it happen to Isaiah Moss. He did not drill. That was the first decision, and the one that mattered, because everyone who had touched this safe before him had reached for a drill, and using a drill on a hard plate door is a coin toss that costs you 4 hours. Vaughn and Rowe put a cobalt plate behind the dial ring on the 1240. Behind that sits a glass relocker, a thin pane wired to the boltwork that shatters if you strike it, and drops a set of dead pins that no key and no combination will ever move again. Whoever had put that carbide bit 4 inches up from the base plate had been about 3/4 of an inch from killing this safe forever. Isaiah worked from the hinge side, where the fire had done him a favor. He set the light low and at an angle so the shadows stretched long across the steel, and he mapped the warp with a straight edge and a feeler gauge, and he found the dish. Barely there. The fire had baked the door, and the hose water had quenched it, and in that fight, the door had pulled away from the top hinge by an amount too small to see and too small to fit a finger into. But it was there. He talked to himself while he worked. He always had. Otis did it too. "All right," he said. "You're not a puzzle, you're a machine. And machines want to open." He cleared out the broken spindle hole with a pick and a magnet and pulled out a plug of carbonized grease. 40 years worth of it, baked down to something like charcoal. Underneath, the spindle stub was still square in its collar. He set a spline brooch onto the stub and laid the tension bar across it, and the fit was perfect. Of course it was. The bar had been cut for that same generation of hardware, in that same decade, by a man who had no idea his grandson would one day need it. He turned it a quarter turn and stopped. Then he did the part no manual covers, the part you can't buy. He pressed the heel of his left hand against the door and held his ear about 4 inches from the steel, and he worked the brooch through the numbers, listening to a fire-damaged lock with 150 pounds of warped door hanging in front of it. The contact points came up dull. At first, everything came up dull, and for about 50 minutes Isaiah heard nothing but the buzz of the fluorescent light and a car going past on Kestrel Street with a bad belt. Then the wheel pack spoke. Not loudly, just a flat click, once, at a spot on the dial that would have been just past 8, if there had still been a dial left to read. He came back at it from the other side and got it again. He wrote it down on the back of the auction receipt with a carpenter's pencil, because that was the paper in his apron pocket, and at the time he thought nothing of it. 4 wheels. It took him until 1:10 to find the second contact point, and another 40 minutes to figure out that the third wheel had a burr on the drive cam from the heat, and would only speak when he approached it from the left. At 2 in the morning, he stood in the doorway of the shop, drank a glass of water, and looked out at the empty street. He thought about his grandfather's hands. Otis Moss had hands like tool handles, and for 41 years he had been the safe man in this county. He had let an 11-year-old boy sit on an overturned bucket in the basement of the First Halworth Savings Building and watch him work a lock for 2 hours without saying a word. At the end, when the door opened, Otis hadn't celebrated. He had wiped the bar on his trouser leg and said the sentence, "The lock will tell you. It just won't tell you twice." Isaiah went back inside. At 3:40 in the morning, the drive cam picked up the 4th wheel and the fence dropped into the gate, and the whole pack turned as one piece with a sound like a small door closing somewhere far away in a big house. He felt it in his palm before he heard it. He backed the brooch out and ran the sequence again just to be sure, because Otis had taught him that a man who opens a safe once got lucky, and a man who opens it twice did the job right. It ran clean the second time. Then he threw the handle. The boltwork slid over with a heavy double clunk. The door shifted 1/4 of an inch and stopped, and Isaiah had to wedge a bar into the gap and lean on it to break 40 years of paint and one night of fire loose from the frame. Then it came open all at once, the way they do. The smell came out first: hot paper, old iron, and something like scorched wool. The inside of a floor safe is its own little country. Fireboard walls, a shelf, a stack of papers about 4 inches high on the bottom, and a green metal cash box in the back corner. The papers were brown around the edges, curled and brittle, the top sheet baked to the color of weak tea. The middle of the stack was untouched. Isaiah didn't snatch it up. He took a clean piece of cardboard and a pair of nitrile gloves from the shelf, lifted the stack out in one piece, laid it flat on the bench, and read the top page under the light. It was a payroll ledger from 1981. Names, hours, a column for room and board deductions. He turned it over. Another ledger sheet. A folded receipt for a boiler repair. Then 20 more pages of the same thing, the ordinary buildup of a building that had been collecting paper for 90 years, and Isaiah felt the disappointment settle over him like a coat. $90, $108 with the premium. He thought about the drill mark and told himself it really was the salvage crew after all. Some kid on the demolition team with a cordless drill and an idea. Then he reached the 22nd page. It wasn't old. It was laser printed on white bond paper, sharp black type, and the sheet hadn't even yellowed. Across the top it said, Meridian Life Safety Group, and below that, Life Safety Systems Audit, Bellrose Hotel, and a date in March, 2 years before the fire. Isaiah read the first page standing up. He read the second page sitting down on an overturned bucket without even noticing he'd done it. Sprinkler zones 3 and 4, shut off at the riser, tamper switches disabled. Fire alarm panel in trouble condition on 11 of 14 supervised circuits. Stairwell B fire door on the 4th floor, chained shut. That entry carried the word chained in capital letters and a line that read, This condition presents an immediate life hazard to occupants and must be corrected prior to further occupancy. 22 pages of it. Every deficiency numbered, every one with a required correction date and a cost estimate. The estimate at the back, to bring the Bellrose into compliance, was $1,800,000. Behind the last page was a single sheet of letterhead, Prescott Group, with an address on the 16th floor of the tower on Dunbar Street that Isaiah had walked past twice that day. It was a memo from the Bellrose's general manager to the owner's office, dated 11 days after the audit. It attached the Meridian report. It asked for authorization to start making corrections, beginning with the stairwell doors and the sprinkler valves, and it used the phrase, "We are exposed." Across the bottom of that memo, in blue ink and a fast, hard hand, someone had written 8 words. Not before the refinance closes. Then we talk. G. P. Isaiah sat on that bucket in a cinder block shop on Kestrel Street at 4 a.m, holding a piece of paper that put a man's handwriting behind the reason a woman named Alma Reyes could not get through a chained door on the 4th floor. He read it 4 times. Somewhere on 9th Street, a garbage truck rumbled its way down the block, and the fluorescent tube over the bench kept ticking. Isaiah understood two things at once. He was holding something men with money would want very badly, and he had signed his own name for it in front of 140 witnesses. He looked back into the safe. The green cash box was still in the corner. He still hadn't opened it. The cash box wasn't locked. That was the detail that told Isaiah the most later, when he had time to think. Whoever had put the last item into that safe had either been in a hurry or trusted the safe to do the job a lock would have done. Inside, there was no cash. There were three things: a pocket notebook with a rubber band around it, a sheet of expensive cream-colored stationery folded in thirds, and a sealed white envelope, letter size, with nothing written on the front. Isaiah opened the notebook first. It belonged to Ellis Doyle because the first page said E. Doyle and gave a phone number, and Isaiah knew the name from the memo about the refinance. Doyle had been the general manager of the Bellrose. The notebook wasn't a diary. It was worse than a diary. It was a list. Dates in one column going back 3 years, a name in the second, an amount in the third. The same name appeared 11 times. W. Pike. Next to it, amounts ranging from $400 to $2,000, and after each one, a note in the shorthand a man uses when he expects no one else to read it. Annual inspection signed. Panel walkthrough, no write-up. Told him about Zone 3, he said it's not his problem this quarter. Isaiah had seen Wendell Pike's name on a plaque at the county building when he pulled a permit for Ray 2 years earlier. Deputy Building Inspector, Fire and Life Safety Division. The cream-colored stationery was from an insurance brokerage, Voss and Ardmore, signed by a broker named Corinne Voss, and addressed to Ellis Doyle at the Bellrose. One paragraph, written by someone who had chosen every word like a lawyer was standing behind her chair. Per our conversation, the carrier's underwriting file reflects sprinkler coverage as fully operational throughout, consistent with the certificate previously provided. Any amendment to that representation at this stage would trigger a re-underwriting review and, in my judgment, a coverage position adverse to the insured. I would not recommend putting anything about this in writing. Isaiah read it twice and understood it the second time through. It was a letter telling a man not to put the truth on paper. He saved the sealed white envelope for last. He held it up to the light and could see 2 sheets inside, one of them handwritten. He did not open it. Some instinct he could not have explained stopped him. He set it on the workbench, looked at it, then took a plastic sleeve from Ray's parts bin and slipped the envelope into it without breaking the seal. That decision saved the whole thing. He didn't know that yet either. Then he stood in the middle of the shop and did the math of his own life. He was 38 years old. He had $411 in a checking account and a daughter who would need new shoes in August. He was working nights for cash for a man on oxygen because his name had been taken from him in the one trade he was good at. It had been taken because the last time he found something wrong in a safe, he wrote it down. He looked at the papers on the bench. He could put it all back. He could weld the door shut, sell 200 kilos of steel to the scrapyard on 9th Street for $60, take Nia out for pancakes, and never think about the Bellrose again. No one in the world would ever know he had made a choice. He thought about that for a long time. Months later, he would tell one person that anyone who says they wouldn't have done it is lying. Then he thought about a chain door on the 4th floor. At 5:20 in the morning, he made his first call, and it was not to a lawyer, and it was not to a newspaper. He photographed all 74 pages on Ray's flatbed scanner, front and back, and emailed the file to himself from the shop computer. Then he drove home, woke Nia at 6:30, made her eggs, walked her to Foster Elementary, and stood at the fence until Miss Farrow took her class inside. Nia looked back once and waved with her whole arm, the way she always did. Then he went to the county courthouse and asked the records clerk for the deed history and mortgage filings on the property at Dunbar and 9th. It took 40 minutes and cost him $9 in copy fees. Since 2015, the Bellrose had been owned by a limited liability company called Sable Landing Partners, and its sole managing member on record was the Prescott Group. 2 years and 1 month before the fire, the property had been refinanced. $42 million, secured against the Bellrose and 2 adjacent lots, with the proceeds earmarked for a mixed-use development called Sable Landing. The refinancing closed on March 28th. The Meridian audit was dated March 9th, 19 days earlier. Isaiah stood at a counter in a county office building with a stack of photocopies and felt the whole thing click into place, and it was not complicated at all. That was the part that sat in his chest like a stone. It was not a conspiracy. It was a scheduling decision. $1,800,000 for fire protection, or a $42 million loan no lender would issue on a building with an unresolved life safety violation. Somebody had looked at those 2 numbers and chosen. 11 days after the audit, a man had written 8 words in blue ink and gone to lunch. The settlement had been reported in the ledger because a city councilman complained about the demolition permit. The Bellrose fire paid out $19,400,000. Isaiah found her son's name in the same story. Tomas Reyes, a bus mechanic for the County Transit Authority. The paper quoted him saying 1 sentence and then did nothing with it. She told me the door on her floor was chained. She told me in October. Isaiah went home and sat at his kitchen table with the copies spread out in front of him and his hands flat on the wood beside them. He did not call the ledger. He called the state fire marshal's office. A chained exit door on the 4th floor of an occupied building is not a story. It is a criminal referral. And at Corwin, he had learned what happens to a man who goes to the press first. He had learned it in a conference room with a paper cup of coffee in front of him, while a lawyer explained the difference between a whistleblower and a disgruntled former employee. The woman who called him back that afternoon said her name was Grace Ferraro, deputy fire marshal, and she listened to him for 11 minutes without interrupting. Then she said, "Mr. Moss, where is the original paper right now?" "In a fire safe in my apartment." "Not the safe it came out of?" "No, ma'am. A different one." There was a pause on the line, and Isaiah could hear her writing. "Don't photograph anything else," Ferraro said. "Don't scan anything else. Don't mail anything. Don't tell your employer, don't tell your neighbor, and if a lawyer calls, you say, 'I'm not discussing it,' and you hang up. Can you be at my office Thursday at 9? "I can." "Bring all of it. Bring the receipt from the auction." Another pause. "Mr. Moss, the moment I open a file on this, that file gets a number, and numbers can be traced. You bought that safe in public. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Isaiah looked across the apartment at his daughter's backpack by the door, purple, with a broken zipper pull he'd been meaning to fix. "Yes," he said. "All right." Ferraro's voice shifted slightly. Thursday. And Mr. Moss, thank you for calling the right office. He hung up. He fixed the zipper pull with a paper clip and a pair of pliers, then sat on the floor with his back against the couch for a while, and Nia came out and asked what he was doing down there. Thinking, Isaiah said. About what? About whether I did something smart, he said. She sat down beside him on the floor, because that was how she solved things. Did you? I don't know yet, baby. 31 hours later, Wednesday morning, a man in a charcoal suit walked into Bevan's lock and safe and set a business card on the counter, and Ray Bevins came out of the office with his oxygen cart, read the name on it, and didn't pick it up. The card said, Bram Whitfield. Under that, Prescott Group, Office of the Chairman. I'm looking for Isaiah Moss, Whitfield said. I understand he bought something at auction. Ray Bevins didn't pick up the card, and he didn't offer the man a chair. He works nights, Ray said. Then I'll wait. It's 9 a.m. Bram Whitfield smiled with the lower half of his face. He was maybe 45, and everything he wore had been chosen by someone who understood that the whole point of an expensive suit is that nobody can tell what it cost. Mr. Bevins, you've been on this street a long time. 30 years? 51. Then you know how a small thing turns into a large thing. Whitfield looked at the pegboard, at the oxygen cart, at the certificate from a manufacturer's school in 1978. My client bought a hotel. His insurers and lenders generated a great deal of paperwork about that hotel, and some of it appears to have gone to auction by mistake, inside a piece of scrap. It's a records custody problem. It's boring. I'd like to make it boring again. Then talk to the auction house. I have. Ray coughed, and it went on for a while, and Whitfield waited it out without any expression at all. When Ray caught his breath, he wheeled the cart forward until it touched the counter. You want me to give you a man's address, Ray said. I want to save everybody some trouble. Get out of my shop. Whitfield left the card on the counter. He didn't need the address, and they both knew it, because the card wasn't a request. It was notice that he had arrived. Isaiah was standing in the doorway of the back bay. He had come in at 8:30 to finish a lock on a display case, and he heard the whole thing from behind a rack of key blanks, and he didn't come out. He would think about that a lot afterward. Not with shame. The day before, on the courthouse steps, he had decided he was going to be dull and exact and slow, and that he would not give any of these men a single sentence they could use. At 11 the next morning, he sat in a conference room on the 3rd floor of the state office building on Marlowe Street, with 74 pages on the Bellrose Hotel in front of him, and a woman across the table taking them one by one. Grace Ferraro was in her early 50s, gray at the temples, sleeves rolled up. She had a legal pad, a camera on a copy stand, and a young man beside her who logged everything and said nothing. She wore reading glasses that she kept pushing up into her hair and then searching for. She spent 19 minutes on the audit alone. When she got to the memo with the 8 words in blue ink, she stopped and read it, and then she set it down on the table and placed both palms flat beside it and looked at the wall for a second. Mr. Moss, she said, do you understand what you brought me? I think so. No, I want to hear you say it, because I need to know what kind of witness I have. She pulled her glasses down. Say it plainly. Isaiah said it plainly. The owner knew the sprinklers were shut off and the stairwell door on 4 was chained shut, and he waited to fix it until after a $42 million loan closed, and 11 months later, a woman burned to death 9 feet from that door. Ferraro did not agree with him. She was too careful for that. She wrote for a while. "Here's where you stand," she said. "The audit by itself is an administrative violation with a fine attached. The audit plus that handwriting is something else. The notebook, if it's authentic, is a bribery case that belongs to the district attorney and the FBI, and I am making that call this afternoon. The broker's letter is insurance fraud, which is federal and not mine at all." She looked up. "You have handed 4 agencies 1 piece each of the same building. What happens now? From this moment on, you become the least interesting man in Hallworth." Ferraro leaned back. "You do not talk. You do not post. You do not tell your daughter's teacher. If anyone from Prescott Group contacts you, write down the time and their exact words and call me first. And listen carefully to this next part, because it's the part people never believe until it actually happens. Go ahead." "They won't go after the documents," she said. "They can't. I have them. I've logged them, and as of tonight, copies exist in 3 different places. So they'll come after you instead. Your record, your credibility, your finances, your custody of your child. That's the playbook, and it's not even a smart one. It's just expensive." Isaiah nodded once. "You don't look surprised," Ferraro said. "No, ma'am." She studied him for a few seconds longer than felt comfortable. "Corwin," she said. "St. Brendan's. The pinned relocker. That was you." "Yes." "I read that file 4 years ago." Ferraro put her glasses back on. "For whatever it's worth, you were right then, too." If this story is getting to you, like the video and tell me in the comments what you would have done. The playbook kicked in 9 days later, and it started small, the way these things always do. First, the shop lost a contract. A property management company that had used Bevan's lock and safe for 19 years sent a 2-line letter ending the arrangement and thanking Ray for his service. No reason given. 2 of the 4 buildings it managed were owned by a company Ray had never even heard of. Ray sat in his office with that letter for a long time, then put it in a drawer and said nothing to Isaiah about it. Isaiah found out because he read the schedule board. Then came the licensing letter. The state licensing board opened an inquiry into whether Isaiah Moss had done safe and vault work while not employed by a licensed contractor of record. It was a real question with a real answer. He had worked under Ray's license the whole time, and every ticket in that shop had Ray's number on it. It took Ray 4 hours to pull the documents together, plus 1 phone call from his accountant. The inquiry was closed 11 days later. But that wasn't the point. The point was the 4 hours. Then Merrick sued him. Isaiah was served on his own front step on a Tuesday evening, with Nia standing 3 feet behind him asking who the man was. The complaint ran 8 pages. It asked the court to rescind the sale of Lot 218 and order the return of the lot and everything in it on the grounds of mutual mistake. The mistake being that neither buyer nor seller had known the lot contained property belonging to a third party. It offered him his $108 back. It also demanded that he identify every person he had shown any of the contents to or passed any of them along to, and that was the only sentence in the 8-page document anybody really cared about. Isaiah read it twice at the kitchen table. "Is it about the safe?" Naya asked. "It's about the safe." "Are they going to take it back?" "They're going to try." She frowned. "But you bought it. Everybody saw." Isaiah looked at his daughter for a moment, at how she had gone straight to the simple fact of it without any detour at all, and he thought that a child who has been told the truth her whole life develops a kind of instrument for recognizing it. "That's right," he said. "Everybody saw." He couldn't afford a lawyer. He called legal aid on 9th Street and got an answering machine. Then he called the county bar referral line and was told the free consultation lasted 20 minutes and the next opening was 6 weeks away. He called Grace Ferraro instead and read her the heading on the complaint. Ferraro was quiet for a second. Then she made a sound that was almost a laugh. "They filed a civil suit," she said, "asking a judge to order the return of documents that are currently in the custody of the state fire marshal as evidence in an active investigation." "Is that bad for me?" "Mr. Moss, that is the best thing that's happened to my file all month." He heard her chair move. "They just put their request in writing, in a public court record with a docket number. Do not answer it yourself. I'm going to give you a name, and you're going to call her today. And when she asks who sent you, you say, 'Ferraro sent me.'" The name was Odette Pruitt. 11 years as a public defender and 3 in private practice, in 2 rooms above a bakery on Pell Avenue. She took the case that same afternoon for free. "For free?" Isaiah said. "Nothing up front," Pruitt said. "There's going to be money in this eventually, Mr. Moss, and it isn't going to come from you, and I'm comfortable waiting. Now sit down and tell me about the $90. 2 weeks later, at 3:19 in the morning, somebody came in through the back window of Bevan's Lock and Safe. They didn't take a single tool. That was the detail that made Detective Aaron Kessel put down his pen and look at the back window a second time. There were $11,000 worth of key machines on the bench, a rack of cordless drills by the door, $90 in the register. None of it had been touched. What had been touched was the safe. Lot 218 was still sitting on the steel dolly under the bright work light, its door hanging open just the way Isaiah had left it, and all 4 fireboard shelves had been yanked out and tossed onto the floor. Somebody had gone into that safe with a flashlight, looking for papers. Ray got there at 6 that morning, his oxygen cart rattling over the cracks in the sidewalk. He stood in the middle of his own shop and put a hand on the workbench to steady himself. 51 years, he said. Nobody ever broke my window. Isaiah swept up the glass himself. He strapped cardboard over the frame, ordered a new pane at 8, and had it installed by noon. Then he did the thing that told you exactly what kind of man he was. He went out and finished both service calls on the board for that day, right on time. Kessel came back that afternoon with a photographer. "Mr. Moss, help me with something," he said. "You bought that safe at auction in April." "Yes." "And there were papers in it." "There were." "Where are those papers now?" "With the State Fire Marshal's office, Deputy Marshal Grace Ferraro." Isaiah wiped his hands on a shop rag. "She logged everything on May 2nd. She'll have a receipt with a case number if you want to call her." Kessel wrote that down slowly, and as he wrote, Isaiah watched the detective's whole posture change, the way a man's shoulders change when he stops working a burglary and starts working something that finally has a shape to it. "Did anybody ask you for those papers?" Kessel said. "A lawyer came by the shop, Bram Whitfield, Prescott Group, and an auction house sued me to get the lot back." Isaiah folded the rag. "I've got both dates written down." Kessel looked at the open safe for a while. "Put a camera on this alley," he said. "And Mr. Moss, if somebody offers you money, don't say no in a way that shuts the conversation down. Say you need time to think about it, then call me. The offer came 4 days later in a diner on 9th Street, and it didn't come from Whitfield because men like Whitfield don't sit in diners. It came from Dale Merrick. He had asked to meet over the phone, in a voice with all the auctioneer polish stripped out of it. He was sitting in a back booth in a golf jacket, with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking, and in 7 weeks, he seemed to have aged 4 years. "You brought your daughter," Merrick said. "She's at the counter getting a milkshake. She can't hear us." Merrick wrapped both hands around the cup. Up close, without a crowd of 140 people to perform for, he was just a man in his 50s with a business. And within a minute, Isaiah understood that Merrick hadn't come to threaten him. He had come because he was terrified. "I didn't know what was in it," Merrick said. "Halloran Salvage consigned the entire building. 306 lots. I sent 2 locksmiths to look at that safe, and both of them told me it was scrap. So I put contents unknown in the catalog because that's the wording. That's what you write. It doesn't mean anything." "All right." Then, the day after the sale, a man in a suit calls me asking who bought lot 218. Merrick worried at the rim of his cup with his thumb. Then he asks for your address. Then he tells me that if the lot were returned, the consignor would be grateful, and that his client's family has done a great deal of business in this county. And I said something I shouldn't have said. "What did you say?" "I said the lot went to a man who paid cash, and I don't go chasing buyers." Merrick looked up for the first time. And he said, "Then perhaps your insurer will chase him for you." And 2 days later, I get a letter from my own carrier opening a review of my consignment procedures. I've been insured by those people for 19 years. Isaiah said nothing. Merrick needed to keep talking, and Isaiah let him. "There was an absentee bid on that safe," Merrick said. $4,000 by email from an entity called Sable Holdings. It came in 11 minutes after the hammer fell. It's time-stamped, and I have it. And I didn't tell that man in the suit I had it. Why not? Because of the way he talked to me. Merrick set the cup down. "I'm 54 years old, and some man in a $900 suit talks to me like I'm the hired help. I've spent my whole life on the other side of that." He stopped. Something passed across his face, carrying a lot of years with it. "And I know what I did in that room in April. My wife watched the live stream." That was as close as Dale Merrick came, that day, to the word he was searching for. Isaiah looked out at the parking lot. Then he said the only thing he was going to say about it. "Send the absentee bid to Odette Pruitt," he said. "Pell Avenue, above the bakery. Send it today and send the metadata with it, not a screenshot." "Are you going to drop the countersuit?" "That's not mine to drop. That's my lawyer's business." Isaiah stood up and took his jacket off the back of the chair. "Mr. Merrick, you're either going to be a witness or you're going to be a defendant. Nobody involved in this is going to let you be neither." Nia came back with a milkshake and a spoon and looked at Merrick with open curiosity. "Are you the man from the loud room?" she asked. Merrick opened his mouth, then closed it. "Yes," he said. "You were funny," Nia said, without any malice at all, the way a child might comment on the weather. "Everybody laughed." Isaiah took her hand, and they went out to the truck. What Merrick sent Pruitt that afternoon did more damage to Garrett Prescott than the audit ever could, and not because of anything to do with fire safety. It proved intent. A $4,000 absentee bid on a piece of scrap steel, submitted by a shell company and arriving 11 minutes too late, is the kind of document that shows someone knew what was inside that safe and tried to buy it back before anyone opened it. Companies do not bid $4,000 on planters. Meanwhile, the pressure shifted off the shop and onto the one thing Isaiah couldn't tie down and protect. It came in an envelope from the County Department of Children and Family Services. It informed Mr. Isaiah Moss that a report had been received concerning the supervision and living conditions of a minor child in his care, and that a caseworker would be conducting a home visit. Isaiah sat down on the arm of the couch with that letter in his hand and stayed there long enough for the light in the room to change. He didn't shout. He got up and cleaned an apartment that was already clean. He bought a smoke detector for the hallway, even though there was already one there, and a fire extinguisher for the kitchen. Then he put Nia's immunization record, her report cards, and Miss Farrow's letter about her reading scores into a folder arranged by date. A folder arranged by date is the only argument some people will accept from a man like him. The caseworker's name was Priya Anand, and she spent 50 minutes in the apartment. She looked in the refrigerator. She looked at where Nia slept. She asked Nia what she ate for breakfast, and Nia said eggs, mostly, and waffles on Sundays, but only the kind you make in the toaster because Dad burns the other kind. She asked who watched Nia during night shifts, and Isaiah brought in Mrs. Okonkwo from across the hall, 74 years old, who had been looking after Nia since she was 3, and who spoke to Miss Anand for 11 straight minutes about how this man had never once been late. At the door, Miss Anand closed her folder. "Mr. Moss, I'm going to say something I'm not supposed to say," she said. "This report came in on a form normally used by a mandated reporter, filed anonymously, and there is nothing in it that anyone who had actually met your daughter would have written. I'm closing it today as unfounded. Thank you." "Whoever you made angry," she said, "used a child services referral to do it. I want you to know I noticed that." She left. Isaiah closed the door and stood there with his forehead against it for a second, and then Nia asked from the kitchen table if she had passed. "There was nothing to pass, baby." "Then why was she here?" And that was the first question in 3 months that Isaiah Moss didn't have a truthful answer for, at least not one he was willing to give a 7-year-old. 10 days later, the state licensing board sent a second letter. This one suspended his certification pending review. A suspended certification doesn't look like anything. It's a sheet of paper, a case number, a sentence saying the matter is under review. It doesn't come right out and say, "You can't feed your child." But that's what it means. Isaiah could still cut keys. He could still replace a deadbolt on someone's front door. But what he could not legally touch, until a board in the state capitol finished a review with no deadline attached to it, was a safe or a vault. And in Hallworth, that was the only kind of work that paid $90 an hour instead of $16. Ray offered him the $16. Ray offered more than that from his own pocket, and Isaiah said no in a tone that ended the conversation. "Don't get proud on me," Ray said. "I'm not being proud. You've got a shop with no property management contract and a front window you paid for yourself." Isaiah hung a ring of key blanks back on the pegboard. "You are not going to support me out of a business they're already squeezing. That's how they get both of us." Ray sat down on the stool by the register and just breathed for a while. "My wife died in this shop," he said. 1996, in the back, doing the books. I was out on a call. He looked at the pegboard, not at Isaiah. "For 2 years after that, this was the only room I could bear to be in. So don't tell me what I can and cannot pay for." Isaiah had no answer to that. On his way to the service bay, he put a hand on Ray's shoulder for a second, which, for him, was practically a whole speech. June was rock bottom. He took a job as a night cleaner at a distribution center past the county line, from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, buffing concrete floors in a building the size of 4 football fields. It paid $16.50 an hour, came with no benefits, and made no use of his 9 years of experience, the manufacturer training courses, or the letters after his name. He was good at it because he was the kind of man who was good at things. Somehow, that was the worst part. The money didn't go far. His truck insurance came due. He sold a compressor. Then he sold his own drill rig, the one he'd bought used at 24, with a bank loan he'd been proud of. A Grimsby 3/8 with a milled base plate, the kind of tool a serious technician spends a career learning to trust. A shop in the next county gave him $1,100 for it. The man who came to pick it up watched Isaiah's face as he loaded it and said, "You'll buy another one." "I know," Isaiah said. He didn't believe it that day. Nia noticed everything. Children whose mothers have died notice everything because they learn that the world can change while they're at school. She stopped asking for things. That was how it showed. She'd look at something in a store and put her hands behind her back, and Isaiah would watch her do it and feel it hit him right under the ribs. In the last week of June, she came home from a birthday party at a trampoline park and asked her question in the doorway with her shoes still on. "Dad, are we poor now?" Isaiah set down the bowl he was drying. "We have less money than we had in April," he said. "Because of the safe?" "Because some people want a piece of paper that I'm not going to give them." Nia thought about that. She was 7, and she had the immense logic of a 7-year-old. "Can't you give it to them?" she said. "And then we'll have money?" He crouched down so they were eye to eye. 4 years earlier, in a hospital hallway, he had promised himself that not once would he ever make her feel stupid for asking a question. "There was a woman named Alma," Isaiah said. "She cleaned a hotel at night the way I clean the warehouse at night. There was a fire, and there was a door she needed, and the door was chained shut, and she didn't get out. The paper says the man who owned that hotel knew about that door for 11 months and didn't fix it, because fixing it would have cost money." Nia's face did the thing that broke him a little. "She died?" "Yes." "And the paper is the only one?" "The paper is the only one." Nia looked at the floor, then looked back up with an expression he would remember for the rest of his life, because it wasn't sad, it was offended. "Then you can't give it to them," she said. "No," Isaiah said. "I can't." "Okay." She finally took off her shoes. "But can we still get the good waffles?" "We can still get the good waffles." They had breakfast for dinner that night, and she told him about the trampoline park, and he listened. After she went to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with the calculator and pushed the electric bill to the 15th. What he didn't know, in June, was that the machinery had already started turning. He didn't know that on the 6th of that month, a federal grand jury had begun taking testimony about the Bellrose refinance. He didn't know that Wendell Pike, deputy building inspector, had sat in a room with 2 FBI agents and a lawyer he couldn't afford and had been shown 11 entries from Ellis Doyle's notebook, and that by the 4th one, Pike had buried his face in his hands. He didn't know that Ellis Doyle himself, 64 years old, was living above a laundromat on Pell Avenue, 9 blocks away. Doyle had left the Prescott Group 8 months after the fire with a separation agreement, a payout, and a non-disclosure clause his own lawyer called probably unenforceable and definitely terrifying. He hadn't worked since. He had a daughter in Ohio who never called. Grace Ferraro found him in the second week of May. She knocked on the door above the laundromat and showed him a single photocopied page. Not the notebook, not the audit. One page. The memo he had written himself, the one that said, "We are exposed," with 8 words scrawled across the bottom in another man's blue ink. Ellis Doyle stared at his own memo for a long time. Then he said, "Where did you get this?" "A man bought a safe," Ferraro said. Doyle laughed then, a single syllable with no humor in it. "The floor safe, in the caged office." He put a hand over his mouth. "I put that envelope in there myself, the night after she died. I didn't know what else to do with it." "What envelope, Mr. Doyle?" And Ellis Doyle, who had spent 19 months not sleeping properly, told Deputy Fire Marshal Grace Ferraro what was inside the sealed white envelope that Isaiah Moss had slipped into a plastic sleeve without ever breaking the seal. In the last week of July, 3 things happened in 5 days. On Monday, the state licensing board reinstated Isaiah's certification without comment in a 4-sentence letter. Odette Pruitt had filed a records request for all communications the board had received concerning Isaiah Moss, and the board's counsel had read what was in its own file. On Wednesday, a judge granted Pruitt's motion to dismiss the Merrick suit, and did it from the bench. What he said about a party asking a court to order the return of evidence in an active criminal investigation would be quoted in the newspaper 4 days later. And on Friday morning, a man named Garrett Prescott decided that the problem was that no one had yet spoken to Isaiah Moss properly. The call came at 9 that morning while he was walking home from the overnight shift, his boots still white with floor dust. "Mr. Moss," Bram Whitfield said, "I think you and I got off on the wrong foot, and that's my fault. Mr. Prescott would like to meet with you, in person, no lawyers, at his office. He has authorized me to say he is prepared to be extremely generous about the position you find yourself in." Isaiah stopped on the 9th Street Bridge, with the river moving below. "When?" he said. "Today, 2 o'clock, 16th floor." "All right." He hung up. Then he called Grace Ferraro. And then he called Odette Pruitt. And Pruitt said one word so loudly he had to pull the phone away from his ear. "Absolutely not." "He's going to say it out loud," Isaiah said. "In his own office, to a man he thinks is broke, with nobody else in the room. Whitfield already told me, no lawyers." There was a long silence on the line. "Mr. Moss," Pruitt said, "do you own a jacket with an inside pocket?" The lobby of the Prescott Group Tower had a polished limestone floor, a security desk with 3 monitors, and a wall of water behind the elevators making the kind of sound someone had designed to be soothing. Isaiah Moss walked across it at 10 to 2 in a clean shirt and a navy canvas jacket, because that was the jacket he owned. The guard made him wait 11 minutes for a badge that had been printed before he got there. Garrett Prescott's office occupied the corner of the 16th floor. It looked north across the river and east over the empty block where the Bellrose had stood until a demolition crew brought it down in March. From that window you could see the entire footprint. Someone had already put up a rendering on a street-level hoarding, a glass building with trees on the terraces and the words "Sable Landing" in letters 4 feet tall. Prescott was 61 and in very good shape, and he came around the desk with his hand out. "Isaiah, thank you for coming." "Mr. Prescott." Sit. Water? Coffee?" He didn't wait for an answer. He sat on the front edge of a chair instead of behind the desk, which is a technique, and leaned forward with his forearms on his knees, which is also a technique. Bram Whitfield sat against the far wall with a legal pad he never wrote on. "I'm going to talk to you man to man," Prescott said. "Is that all right?" "Go ahead." "You've had one hell of a spring, and a lot of it came from my organization, and I want to own that." Prescott raised a hand. "Not all of it was on my instruction. Some of it was people around me being loyal in stupid ways. The licensing issue. That was clumsy, and I've dealt with it." Isaiah said nothing. "Here's where we really are." Prescott's voice dropped into something warmer. "There is a project on that block worth $400 million over 10 years. 1,100 construction jobs. A grocery store in a neighborhood that hasn't had one since your daughter was born. And all of it is sitting on a lender's desk 300 miles from here, not moving, because a fire marshal in this town is holding 22 pages of paper about a building that no longer exists." He let that land. "Now, a woman died in that building, and that is the worst thing that ever happened on my watch, and I've paid for it in ways you can't see from where you're sitting." Prescott put on a convincing show of sincerity. "But her family has been compensated. Her son received a settlement. Nothing that happens to me now will bring that woman back." "No," Isaiah said. "It won't." "So let's talk about what can still be helped." Prescott held his gaze. "You're a certified vault technician, and you've been polishing floors in a warehouse for $16.50 an hour. That's obscene. Personally, I find it offensive." He rested a hand on the arm of the chair. "I own or control 11 commercial properties in this county. Every one of them has an access control and safe service contract, and every single one is held by an out-of-state company. I want those contracts moved to Moss Safe and Vault. Sole source, 5 years with a guaranteed minimum. Call it $300,000 a year in billings. You'd be hiring 4 people by Christmas." Isaiah didn't move. "And the litigation goes away," Prescott said. "All of it. Merrick's lawsuit, the board issue, the child services nonsense, which I didn't know about until last week and which made me sick. That ends today. And there's a signing payment due when the deal is executed. I'm authorized to go as high as $400,000. The room was very quiet. Somewhere down below, on Dunbar Street, a bus pulled away from a stop. "And in exchange," Isaiah said, "in exchange, you go back to the fire marshal's office and tell them the truth," Prescott said. "That you bought a piece of scrap at an auction and found some old papers inside it, and you have no idea what any of it means, no idea where it came from, no idea whether it's complete or authentic or altered, and that, as a witness, you're not in a position to authenticate any of it." He spread his hands. "That's all true, Isaiah. Every word of it is literally true. You don't have to lie. You just have to stop being certain." He smiled. "Nobody can build a case around a witness who isn't certain." There it was. Isaiah looked at the man for a moment. Then he looked past him, out the window, at the empty lot wrapped in hoarding, with that architectural rendering of trees on it. "Mr. Prescott," he said, "do you know what the bolt work in a floor safe does when the room above it burns for 6 hours?" Prescott blinked. "I'm not following." "Nothing," Isaiah said. "It does nothing. The steel heats up and wants to move, and maybe it shifts a fraction, but the door stays exactly where it was set. That's the whole point of it. It doesn't care what's happening in the room. He rested his hands on his knees. My grandfather installed that safe in 1971. He set the lock, checked the door, and stamped his mark into the base plate. Then he went home. He never thought about that hotel again for the rest of his life. Isaiah, I'm offering you. That safe kept its door shut for 11 months after a man wrote 8 words on a memo, Isaiah said. It held through the fire. It held when somebody took a carbide bit to it in a salvage yard and gave up 3/4 of an inch short of killing it. It kept that door shut for a woman it never knew. He stood up. I opened it, he said. I'm not going to be the one who tells a room full of strangers I don't know what came out of it. Whitfield was already on his feet. Prescott stood up more slowly, and all the warmth had drained from his face. And what was underneath wasn't anger. It was astonishment. Isaiah watched a man worth what Prescott was worth try and fail to force those words into a shape he recognized. $400,000, Prescott said. I heard you. You clean floors. Yes, sir. You have a child. Something changed in the room when he said that. It was almost imperceptible. Isaiah went still in the way people do when they've seen enough. And he looked at Garrett Prescott, and he didn't raise his voice, and he didn't step forward. Say the rest of that sentence, Isaiah said. Prescott did not say the rest of that sentence. I'm leaving now, Isaiah said. He took his jacket off the chair, draped it over his arm, and walked to the door. Then he stopped, because there was one thing left, and it belonged to him. You had 11 months, he said. You had $1,800,000 and 11 months, and a manager who put it in writing and asked you twice. There was a door on the 4th floor with a chain on it. He opened the door. A woman named Alma Reyes came to work at 10 o'clock at night, 4 nights a week, for 9 years. He walked out. The elevator took a long time. Isaiah stood in that lobby with the wall of water making its soothing sound and his heart pounding hard. And then he pushed through the revolving door onto Dunbar Street, into the afternoon heat, walked 2 blocks, and got into Odette Pruitt's car. Pruitt was in the driver's seat with a yellow legal pad. Well, she said. Isaiah reached into the inner pocket of the navy canvas jacket and took out a small digital recorder, switched it off, and set it on the console between them. 41 minutes, he said. Pruitt looked at the recorder. Then she looked at Isaiah, started to laugh, and covered her face with both hands. He said the number out loud. He said the number out loud, twice. And with his lawyer in the room, he told me exactly what to say to the fire marshal. Mr. Moss, Pruitt lowered her hands. This state is a one-party consent state. Do you know what that means? It means I didn't need his permission. It means, Pruitt said, we are going to have a very interesting Monday. Monday was interesting. At 9 that morning, Odette Pruitt walked into the U.S. Attorney's office on Marlowe Street with a certified copy of a 41-minute recording, a transcript, and a chain of custody log. At 11, she did it again in Grace Ferraro's office. By Thursday, the recording had been played for 4 federal prosecutors and 2 FBI agents, and one of the agents asked to hear the last 90 seconds twice. It wasn't the money that brought Garrett Prescott down. It was the instruction. A man can offer another man a contract. He can even offer a bad contract for a bad reason. But when a man on the 16th floor tells a witness in an open federal investigation exactly what to say to the government, he stops being a real estate developer and becomes a defendant in a witness tampering case. The government likes that charge. It's simple and it lands. The indictment came down in September. 11 counts against 3 defendants. Garrett Prescott, for conspiracy to commit wire fraud in the refinance, for insurance fraud, and for witness tampering. Wendell Pike, for accepting unlawful gratuities. He had been cooperating since June, and he pleaded out. Corinne Voss, for wire fraud in the underwriting representations. Her carefully worded one-paragraph statement turned out to be the most incriminating document any of them produced, because she had put in writing the fact that she knew. Ellis Doyle was not charged. He had walked into Ferraro's office on May 15th and given a statement over 2 days, and he had brought a shoebox with him. And in October, a state grand jury added the count that mattered to Hallworth: reckless endangerment resulting in death against Garrett Prescott and the death of Alma Reyes of room 409. That charge existed because of the white envelope. Isaiah had never opened it. It went into Grace Ferraro's evidence log with the seal intact, and a forensic document examiner opened it in a lab in the state capitol with 2 agents watching. Inside were 2 sheets of paper. The first was a handwritten letter, neat ballpoint on lined paper torn from a spiral notebook dated October 6th, 4 months before the fire. It was signed Alma Reyes, 409. She had written it to the Bellrose management office. She wrote that the door to stairwell B on the 4th floor had been chained and padlocked since the summer. She wrote that she had reported it to the front desk twice. She wrote that on her floor, 3 residents used walkers and 1 used a wheelchair, and that the elevator had been out of service for 11 days in August. Near the end, she wrote a sentence that a prosecutor would read aloud in court the following spring, in a voice that needed no help from him. If there's a fire on my floor at night, I do not know where people are supposed to go. In the top corner, in a different pen, was a date stamp, received, with the date, stamped by the Bellrose management office itself. On the back of that letter, in Ellis Doyle's handwriting, were 7 words. GP says no. Log it lost. The second sheet was the internal office log for that week, with 1 entry crossed out. That was what a man had tried to buy for $4,000 through a shell company 11 minutes after the hammer fell. That was what someone had taken a carbide bit to in a salvage yard, stopping 3/4 of an inch short of destroying it forever. That was what 140 people in good coats had laughed at in a converted movie theater on Dunbar Street on a cold morning in April. Tomas Reyes had signed a settlement 14 months after his mother died because a lawyer explained to him what it would cost to fight. Odette Pruitt filed a motion to reopen the case on grounds of fraudulent concealment and attached his mother's letter. Marisol Quinn's story ran across 2 full pages of the Sunday Ledger. It included the 8 words in blue ink, photographed on the page. It included the absentee bid, $4,000, time-stamped 11 minutes late. And near the end, it included 1 paragraph about a man who paid $108 for lot 218 and spent a night in a cinder block shop on Kestrel Street opening it. What really spread through Hallworth was not the newspaper. It was 90 seconds from the auction live stream. Merrick had streamed the April sale the way he streamed all of them, and the archive was still online. Someone clipped lot 218, the 2 men rolling out the scorched safe, the room making that noise, Merrick leaning into the microphone. $40 to save this man from himself. The laughter. And then the wide shot from the back camera, where you can see a man in a canvas work jacket raise a paddle with a sleeping child on his shoulder. It went out on a Tuesday, and by Friday, it had been shared 11,000 times in this county alone. The Prescott Group's lender froze the construction loan for Sable Landing in October. In November, the board asked Prescott to resign, and the vote wasn't even close. The motion was introduced by a board member named Marguerite Sloan, who had served on that board for 9 years. She had 3 sentences entered into the minutes. The second read, "We were told in March of that year, and we did not ask a single follow-up question, and that failure is ours, not only his." In February, during the week marking the anniversary of the fire, Prescott pleaded to 2 federal charges and 1 state charge. He was sentenced to 41 months in federal custody, ordered to pay $11 million in restitution, and permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of a public company. Wendell Pike got 14 months. Corinne Voss gave up her broker's license and served 9. No one was killed. No one was dragged out of a building by a mob. It was done with paperwork, a case number, and 41 minutes of a man's own voice. Dale Merrick testified for the government in March. He did it badly, in the sense that he was visibly ashamed the entire time and, well, in the sense that the jury believed every word. He authenticated the catalog, the consignment agreement, the receipt, and the absentee bid from Sable Holdings, LLC. On cross-examination, the defense asked whether he himself had not described the lot in his own catalog as containing nothing of value. "I said it was scrap," Merrick said. "I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a couple of things in that room." Isaiah testified on a Wednesday in April, almost exactly a year after the auction. He was on the stand for 2 hours and 11 minutes and never raised his voice. He explained the safe's model number, the shape of the warp, the sheared spindle, the bright burr on the abandoned drill mark. He explained what a glass relocker is and why whoever had tried to drill it had come within less than an inch of making the contents unrecoverable forever. Twice, the court reporter asked him to slow down on the technical terms. The defense had one real line of attack, and they used it. They asked about Corwin Vault and safe, whether it wasn't true that he had been let go for being difficult, whether he had a pattern of accusing employers, whether he had a financial stake in the outcome. "I paid $108 for the safe," Isaiah said. "And you stand to gain nothing from this testimony?" "I lost my certification for 4 months, and I buffed floors at night. No, sir." The lawyer went after Corwin one more time, and the judge allowed it, and Isaiah answered the way he had answered everything. "At St. Brendan's, I found a relocker that had been pinned so it couldn't fire," he said. "That's a narcotics vault in a hospital. I documented it because that's what the certification requires. You're welcome to the report." The lawyer sat down. On his way out of the courtroom, in the hallway by the elevators, a man in a work shirt with a county transit patch on the sleeve was standing against the wall waiting for him. Alma Reyes held out his hand. "You didn't know her," he said. "No," Isaiah said. "She kept a list of everything broken in that building." Tomas's voice faltered and he stopped, then found it again. "Nobody wanted the list. For 19 months, I've been telling people about the door, and they look at me like I'm just a man grieving his mother." Isaiah shook his hand and didn't let go right away. "She wrote it down," Isaiah said. "That's why any of this happened. She wrote it down, and somebody put it in a safe to bury it, and that was the wrong place to bury anything." The apology came in May, in a parking lot, which is where most real apologies happen. Isaiah was loading a floor safe onto a flatbed outside a jewelry store on Dunbar Street when Dale Merrick pulled in 2 spaces over and sat in his car for a while before getting out. Merrick Estate Auctions had lost its insurer and then its lease, and Merrick was selling farm equipment out of a warehouse in the next county now. He came over with his hands in his jacket pockets. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for about a year," Merrick said. Isaiah set the strap and tightened it. "I stood up in front of a room and turned you into the joke," Merrick said. "I didn't do it because of the safe. I've had a year to be honest with myself, and I'm not going to come out here and lie in a parking lot. You walked in with a work jacket and a kid, and I decided in 2 seconds what you were. And then I sold it to the room because the room was ready to buy it." His jaw tightened. "My daughter sent me the clip. She said, 'Dad, that's you.'" Isaiah put the ratchet in the toolbox and closed the lid. "I'm sorry," Merrick said. "There's no version of this where that's enough, but I am." Isaiah looked at him for a moment. Then he gave him a small nod. One movement of the head, with no warmth in it and no cruelty either. The kind of nod a man gives when something has been said and received and doesn't need a second sentence built on top of it. He got into the truck, pulled the door shut, and started the engine. And Dale Merrick stood in a parking lot on Dunbar Street and watched him go. That was all of it. That was the whole transaction. Moss Safe and Vault operates out of a cinder block building on Kestrel Street with a hand-painted sign out front. Ray Bevins sold Isaiah the business in the fall for $1 and a promise to keep Ray's name on the invoices for as long as Ray was still alive to read them. Most mornings, Ray comes in with his oxygen cart, sits on the stool by the register, and tells the 2 new technicians they're doing everything wrong. The property management company came back. Isaiah told them the price was the price, and there'd be no discount for the 19 years, and they signed anyway. He bought another drill rig in December. It was a used Kestrel 280 from a retiring technician in the next county who'd heard about the case and knocked $200 off the price without being asked, which in that line of work is about as close as you get to a parade. Lot 218 sat in the back bay for 3 months after the trial. Then Isaiah did something with it. The shop welded a steel base onto it, and he took it to the county transit maintenance yard where Alma Reyes works, and the 2 of them bolted it to the concrete floor of the break room where the night crew eats at 2 in the morning. Tomas had a plate engraved and screwed onto the door where the dial used to be. It reads, "Alma Reyes wrote it down." The bus mechanics keep coffee filters in it. On a Saturday in June, Isaiah walked his daughter to Foster Elementary for the end-of-year event where the second graders read something they'd written. Nia was 8 now. With a loose tooth she would not stop giving updates on. She had written 4 sentences about her father's job, and she stood up in front of 40 parents in a gym and read them from a sheet of paper she held in both hands. "My dad opens safes," she read. "People think it's like on television, but mostly he listens. He says the lock will tell you, but it won't tell you twice. That's why he doesn't talk much when he's working." Miss Farrow put her hand over her mouth. The parents laughed, and it was a good laugh, and Isaiah sat in a folding chair in the 3rd row with his hands on his knees and didn't trust himself to say anything for a minute or 2. Afterward, a man Isaiah didn't know came over and asked if he was the one from the auction, and Isaiah said he was a locksmith on Kestrel Street. They walked home the long way, past the corner of Dunbar and 9th. The lot is still empty. The lender took it back. The hoarding with the render came down in January, and now there's chain link fencing and gravel and chicory growing through it, which is what grows on a demolished block in this county. The city has a hearing scheduled about affordable units. It'll take years. Nia stopped at the fence, the way she always did. Is this the hotel? This is where it was. She stood there for a while, peering through the chain-link fence at the gravel below. She was old enough now to hold two truths in her head at once. That's something that starts happening around 8. And Isaiah watched her do it. The lady's letter was in the safe the whole time, she said. The whole time. And nobody could open it except you. A few people could have opened it, Isaiah said. They just didn't think it was worth the effort. They kept walking. The evening breeze came cool off the Sable River for June, and Kestrel Street smelled of freshly cut grass and sun-baked asphalt, while somewhere, 2 blocks away, someone was running a saw. I hope you enjoyed that story. Like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Back home, Isaiah made eggs because it was Saturday and eggs were the routine, and Nia did her 20 minutes of reading at the kitchen table, her feet swinging. The shelf by the door still holds a steel tension bar with 2 letters filed into the flat side of it, O and M. Now it has a new nick in it too, from the 4th wheel of a Vaughan & Rowe 1240 on a night in April, and Isaiah has thought about filing it smooth 100 times and hasn't done it once. That evening he took it down and turned it over in his hands under the kitchen light while the water ran. Across town, a man who had once owned 16 floors on Dunbar Street was serving 41 months, and a deputy inspector was working in a hardware store in another state. Nobody in that apartment mentioned any of it. "Dad?" Nia said, without looking up from her book. "Can we get the good waffles tomorrow?" "We can get the good waffles." He put the bar back on the shelf beside the navy canvas jacket, where his grandfather's mark could catch the light. He never had to say who he was again.
Sometimes the world laughs at a man simply because it cannot see what he carries inside. Isaiah did not answer humiliation with anger. He answered it with patience, skill, and a refusal to abandon the truth, even when staying silent could have made his life much easier. The burned safe became more than a piece of scrap metal. It became proof that integrity can survive fire, pressure, and powerful people trying to bury it. What makes Isaiah heroic is not that he opened an impossible lock, but that he refused to look away after discovering what was hidden behind it. In the end, the crowd's laughter revealed nothing about his worth, and everything about their blindness.